the victim.
We don't see stories like this very often. A DoorDash driver who went viral claiming she was sexually assaulted on a delivery, only police say that's not what happened at all. And now she's the one facing felony charges, and a grand jury just made a major decision. So what really happened inside that house, and did she cross a line? We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about this app called Upside that gets you cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, and takeout. Here's what you do. Download Upside for free, claim an offer at one of their 100,000 plus locations, then pay like you typically would with your card, verify the purchase, and you get money back. I use it on gas, also takeout. I'll search for offers on Upside first, then after I spend, money appears in my app, and I just transfer it straight to my bank. Upside's frequent users earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code and use promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents bonus on every gallon on your first tank of gas. This story begins in a way so many do on a typical night. Someone orders some food to be delivered by DoorDash, and a driver shows up to make a delivery, and according to police, when they get there, this is where things become very unique, let's just say. The front door of the house was open, and inside there was a man who was passed out on his couch, allegedly with his pants and underwear down. So this woman, the driver, Olivia Henderson, per police, does what probably no other delivery driver would do, you would think. She allegedly pulls out her phone and records the man, and then she goes a step further and puts that video on TikTok. And the story she tells, it is a very serious story.
3 days ago, October 12th, 2025, I was a victim of SA by a DoorDash customer while I was doing my job as a DoorDash driver.
Hundreds of thousands of people viewed that TikTok, but according to the Oswego Police Department, that's not what happened. Police say the man was not a predator. He was unconscious, incapacitated by alcohol. He was drunk, according to police. And according to their investigation, no sexual assault occurred. So the investigation was not focused on him. The investigation was focused on the person who took a video of him, that DoorDash driver, Olivia Henderson. And Henderson was arrested in November. She was charged with 2 felonies, unlawful surveillance and dissemination of an unlawful surveillance image. Now this story just took another major turn and got even more serious because on May 1st, a grand jury indicted Henderson, finding probable cause that she committed felonies, and she appeared in court that same day. And you can see that we have video of her walking into that courtroom courtesy of WSYR-TV. Now she's pleaded not guilty to these 2 felonies that she faces, but this case is not going away anytime soon, it seems, because if she's convicted, she is looking at up to 8 years in prison for what she allegedly did. So the big question that is at the center of this, it's an obvious one. What really happened that night? Was she a victim who was fighting back, or did she cross a major legal line by recording an unconscious man, allegedly, and putting him on the internet as he lay inside his own home? Now, according to the Oswego Police Department, this happened back on October 12th, 2025. So this has been going on for a while. And Olivia Henderson was working as a DoorDash driver in Oswego, New York, which is north of Syracuse. It's right on Lake Ontario. And according to police, when she arrived at the home of this male customer, he was, quote, incapacitated and unconscious on his couch due to alcohol consumption. And I mentioned she posted a video of him on TikTok, which reportedly went viral, and she continued to post, with one of her videos reportedly totaling, get this, 30 million views. In her original video, which she said TikTok kept removing, she claimed the customer had intentionally exposed himself to her, and she said she was a victim of a sexual assault. I mean, these are very serious allegations, and they're very concerning allegations that a police department would need to investigate fully. Now, Henderson went on to allegedly say that she reported everything to DoorDash, and the customer was banned. Then, according to her TikTok videos, DoorDash deactivated her account.
3 days ago, October 12th, 2025, I was a victim of SA by a DoorDash customer while I was doing my job as a DoorDash driver. Excuse me if you've already seen this. This is my 3rd time posting this because TikTok keeps silencing me and taking my videos down and giving me strikes. I reported it to DoorDash, and DoorDash did ban the customer. And then 2 days later, DoorDash banned me. which doesn't seem unrelated. I appealed, and they were supposed to respond to my appeal within 7 to 10 business days. And within 12 hours afterward, they had already denied my appeal. So I'm really never getting my DoorDash account back.
And she said her only justice was exposing the man she claims assaulted her online.
No, I'm going to keep telling my story. Like, this is the only justice I'm getting, is exposing this man and having posted that video and it has gone viral. Like, now he can live with shame and embarrassment if people have seen it and knows who he is or where he, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm the one being punished. He's not getting in trouble with the police. He didn't lose his job if he has one. Like, what's going on with him? Why am I getting fired? Why are my videos getting taken down, and why am I getting strikes? Like, I'm about to lose my account. I was assaulted. I'm the victim. I lost my job. I'm the victim.
And Henderson was right. The police were not helping her. They were actually focusing on her. On October 16th, 2025, DoorDash posted its own statement on TikTok. It said, quote, "We've seen some tough and sensitive posts over the past few days, and we want to clear the air. No one should ever have to experience sexual assault, harassment, or abuse, and DoorDash never deactivates someone for reporting it, full stop. We take these reports incredibly seriously and work closely with law enforcement to investigate and support those affected. In this case, the Dasher let us know about an experience that made them feel unsafe, and that is exactly what we always want Dashers to do. Our team immediately began investigating and has been in direct contact with law enforcement and is prepared to fully support any of their efforts. However, posting a video of a customer in their home and disclosing their personal details publicly is a clear violation of our policies. That is the sole reason that this Dasher's account was deactivated along with the customers while we investigated. We've also ensured that the Dasher has full access to their earnings. We know these are sensitive situations, and we want every Dasher to know if you ever feel unsafe or experience something concerning, come to us. We're here to listen, act, and support." Now, the man depicted in the video cooperated with investigators and provided a statement. Police determined that he was unconscious at the time and he was not capable of any intentional act. The statement goes on to say, quote, "The video, along with the subsequent investigation, indicates that the male was incapacitated and unconscious on his couch due to alcohol consumption. The video was taken from the exterior of the male's residence. The DoorDash driver subsequently posted the video to social media, where it drew significant attention. It was further discovered that the DoorDash driver had made claims of being sexually assaulted during this incident. The investigation by the Oswego Police Department determined that no sexual assault occurred. The male depicted in the video cooperated with police and provided a statement," end quote. And that is a blistering response to very disturbing allegations that were made allegedly by Olivia Henderson. Then we go a month later, November 10th, 2025. Weeks after her videos went viral, Henderson was arrested. She was charged with 2 Class E felonies, second-degree unlawful surveillance and first-degree dissemination of an unlawful surveillance image. And then, of course, she was indicted. She pleaded not guilty, and that is where we are today. Henderson is due back in court on June 5th. 2026. Joining us now once again to talk about what is really just a bizarre case, Paul Townsend, criminal defense attorney. Good to see you here on Law and Crime. So she has been indicted now in this case. What do you make of where we are at this point?
Yeah, Olivia Henderson has been indicted in upstate New York. There's two charges that she's been indicted for: the unlawful surveillance in the second degree, as well as the dissemination of unlawful surveillance images in the first degree. These are both E felonies. They're relatively low. She's released on her own recognizance. But it is kind of interesting the way this case has developed, because, as we know, she was working as a DoorDash driver. She gets an order. The order says, "Please leave whatever it is at the front door." She goes up, and it's just, the front door is basically open, and there's a glass door, and she sees, the quote unquote victim inebriated on a couch in a state of undress. And rather than just leave the DoorDash order there and leave and think to herself, "Wow, that was really unpleasant and uncomfortable," she records him. And I think what really gets her in trouble is not the fact that she recorded him, although that technically would be the unlawful surveillance in the second degree. What she does is she uploads it to TikTok, and it becomes 30 million hits. It goes viral on social media. And at that point, it really the snowball starts rolling down the mountain. And that's where she loses control of this. She initially attempts to frame herself as the victim, notifying the police that he had somehow sexually harassed her by being passed out on a couch. But ultimately, as we see, she's the one who gets arrested. She's the one who gets indicted. And now, I think, largely because of the decisions that she made, she's facing, real legal issues.
She certainly is. And I think of like the view count. I mean, it was 30 million views before it was removed. And that is insane, just an amount of reach there on social media. In the eyes of the law and what she's accused of and like the crimes that she could be convicted of if this were to go to trial, does the fact that it went viral like that play into whether or not she could be guilty of either of these charges?
So it's a great question because the answer is kind of both yes and no.
Yeah.
Technically, under the law, in a emotionless and rational state of the penal law of New York State, the answer is no. It doesn't matter if it's one view, 1 million views, 30 million, 100 million. The act of what she did is what constitutes the crime. But we know that human beings are not always 100% rational creatures. We are emotional creatures. And so it is impossible to completely divorce the actions of what she did from the fact that 30 million people saw this guy and the public shame, ridicule, humiliation that he felt, being compounded by just the sheer volume of hits that this got on TikTok. So technically, no, the amount of hits won't make a difference. But if you're a juror sitting and listening to this case and you hear that this wasn't just, shared between her friends and 5 people laughed at this poor guy, you hear that 30 million people were exposed to this, it creates a reaction in a reasonable person or a reasonable juror that is going to really make it more likely that she is going to get convicted. And the national press that this case has received is also going to make it more likely that she's going to suffer consequences for this.
I mean, you just think of this guy and it's like, he just wakes up, I'm sure. And it's like, you just thought you ordered DoorDash, certainly something happened that maybe you're not proud of, but then it's like, you find out 30 million people and then it's a police investigation. And then, we don't know his name, his identity is not out there, but, I didn't see the video, but if somebody did and they recognize him, you just think of like the implications of this. And I'm sure there's a civil side to this story as well. Part of this story like made me think back to journalism school when you learn, when it comes to like photographing, a crime scene or something of like what your right to privacy is. Like, and if you see something, when you go to that crime scene, the crime scene tape, that's what we're taught and all of that. In eyes of the law, and in this case, if he's inside his house, like what is his right to privacy in a case like this where he's being recorded?
So inside his house, he has what the law terms a reasonable expectation of privacy. Now, in most circumstances, that applies to law enforcement's actions. Law enforcement can't conduct a search without a warrant of his house. They can't enter his house without permission or without a warrant. But there are certain parts of the penal code that protect people's privacy in general, whether they're in their house or whether they're in any other place where they would have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And unlawful surveillance in the second degree, which is what Ms. Henderson has been charged with, really prevents somebody from, for their own amusement, entertainment, or for the purpose of just degrading somebody, recording them in either a state of undress or in some kind of sexually gratuitous way. So the fact that it's in the house, I think, really just kind of solidifies who's kind of in the wrong in this situation. Yeah. But it's really, a shame for this guy who now has to go through all of this, who has to testify in front of a grand jury, who, if she decides that she wants to exercise a right to a trial, he's going to have to take the stand in a public trial and talk about this. And then his identity is going to be out for the world because the case will get more media coverage. So it really is a shame how this has really kind of turned this poor guy's life upside down, and his privacy has really been invaded, for no other reason than he was drunk on his own couch, and specifically left instructions not to ring the doorbell, not to come inside, but to just leave the package at the front door. And had that been done, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it.
How important is that? Because obviously anybody who orders DoorDash, like you can tell, like I hate when people ring my doorbell. So it's like mine says like, please don't ring the doorbell, just leave it there, take a picture. Like the fact that you have in writing, if you're a prosecutor, of like your job is to leave the food right at the door, don't go inside, as opposed to if he had said, please come inside, lay it like right here, even if he didn't, like how much does just that probably sentence that he has on his DoorDash account impact potentially what her defense could be if this were to go to trial?
It certainly hampers her ability to put a defense together, because the idea would be essentially that she could potentially try and finagle some argument that in the absence of any kind of explicit instructions, she wasn't sure if she should ring his doorbell, if she should, kind of peer in to see if he's in there. But since we have these explicit instructions basically saying, you don't need to come in, you don't need to ring the doorbell, you don't need to wait for me, you don't need to have any personal contact, all you have to do is just drop the package off at the front door and you're done, it really kind of solidifies that what she did was not in any way within the scope of any acceptable work-related function. Not that ever recording through a glass door would be a normal thing for a DoorDash person to do, but you could imagine a situation where if there were no instructions, somebody coming up and a door is open, the DoorDash person might, knock on the door, ring the doorbell, look inside, see if the person's there so they could personally hand it to them. But in this particular case, he made it clear, you don't need to do any of that, just put it down and go away.
And looking at the statement that police had put out at the time of her arrest, and it was, quote, it was further discovered that the DoorDash driver had made claims of being sexually assaulted during this incident. The investigation by the Oswego Police Department determined that no sexual assault occurred. If she made those allegations, and I know she did publicly make those allegations, I believe she also filed a police report. Does that pigeonhole her in? Like if you're a defense attorney and if you do want to take this to trial, that you kind of have to go with that account that she gave back then as what her defense potentially could be?
I don't know if it necessarily pigeonholes you. It's certainly going to be difficult to raise that as a viable defense given the reaction of the police department. If she were, for her to make that argument, she would essentially have to take the stand to say, I felt sexually harassed by the way that he was when I went up there, which is going to be a difficult thing to claim if he's passed out on a couch in his own home and doesn't have any personal interaction with her whatsoever. Claiming sexual harassment just by virtue of somebody sleeping on a couch is a tough sell, I think, on a good day. But it's not necessarily something that I think she's going to be required to do. I think she's going to the extent that she wants to take this to trial, and I really don't think this case is going to wind up in a trial. I think it's going to ultimately be kind of maybe reduced to something, non-criminal and worked out with, some sort of either probation or community service, something like that. But I think it's going to be, the defense would have to be, that this wasn't done for entertainment or profit. But I think that's a hard sell, and she put it on TikTok.
Yeah. And it's a very hard sell. And, to your point, like, if it doesn't go to trial, but then I also think of like a civil side of it, like could be a problem for her considering, how many people saw that video. Like, how does that part of it kind of get involved where it's like, okay, so here's the criminal part of it. Maybe she does plea out and it's, ends up being something non-criminal unless, if you're this victim, 30 million people saw that video. Who knows what type of impact it had on his life because, we don't know his identity at this point. Like, how is that part kind of quantified and understanding like what the impact really was on his life, but also knowing like as a DoorDash driver, she's probably not someone who has like a ton of money at 23 years old.
Right. And that's really kind of the rate limiting factor in a case like this. So when you have a situation where, somebody is victimized, if she pleads guilty to anything, it will very likely make proving a civil case very easy. If she has to go on the record in a criminal court, raise her hand, swear to tell the truth, and admit to any facet of what's going on here, a civil case for infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, unauthorized use of his likeness, all of that is probably fairly easy to prove. The question is, what are you going to recover? And sometimes people want to start a lawsuit just based on the principle, this happened to me. This person needs to know that that's not okay. And I'm fine with just having, basically a civil judgment against this person, realizing that they have no money and I'm never going to see a red cent from it. But I want the principle of this to be upheld. But a lot of lawyers are going to probably shy away from this and say, suing somebody who just got fired from a DoorDash job, I'm not going to make any money off this.
Yeah, no, that's also a really good point. I just wondered for you also as a criminal defense attorney, I mean, social media is still relatively new. The idea of going viral is something relatively new. I feel like TikTok has the ability to go viral in ways that like other social media platforms don't have, just with how quick the algorithm operates. Like, how common are cases like this? Doesn't seem like we see it that often, but just have you ever seen anything like this?
So cases specifically like this, where somebody, films somebody in a state of undress, they're not too common. But I will say we are seeing a rise in the use of social media with respect to criminal prosecutions. I've had a number of clients that have, taken photographs of themselves holding guns, holding drugs, and putting it on their social media. And that allows law enforcement to then get a warrant for that person's home if the photo is clearly taken in their house, and they can be arrested because probable cause can be established by photos that they put on social media or videos that they upload of people doing acts that are prohibited by the penal law. That can be used as evidence against somebody. So I tell all of my clients, you have to be very careful about what you put on social media, because anything that you put out publicly can be used if it constitutes evidence of a crime. And you have to be very cognizant that once something is out on the internet, it's out there forever. So any statements that you make, any videos or photos that you publish, you have to be comfortable that you are not going to be sitting around 6 months, 2 years, 5 years later and see yourself on the business end of a criminal prosecution because you decided that something would be funny or cool and you thought it was just going to be for your friends. It gets out.
Yeah. And in a completely different situation, just a side comment, like ChatGPT is the one I feel like I've seen a lot of cases of recently of people literally asking the worst question I'm sure a criminal defense attorney would want to see their client ask. Not what we're dealing with in this one. This one is certainly in a league of its own, at least at this point. Paul Townsend, criminal defense attorney. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. Thanks for talking about this case with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also find our episodes streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.